So you may have seen on the shop that we have decided to upgrade our overlanding rig to this LX470 that's behind me. Now this rig has 227,000 miles on it, and as I pointed out in the introductory video, there's a bit of maintenance that we need to do. Now I've already changed out the oil and the oil filter on this vehicle for the engine, so that's done, as well as the air filter, and I'm happy with that. However, I can't see any records of the transmission oil, the transfer case oil, as well as the differential oils being changed. So in this video, I'm going to go ahead and go through how to change those oils. What I do want to do is do a shout out to Timmy the Toolman. I have followed his video on YouTube, and that will form the basis of what I'm going to do to change the transmission fluid. Now, changing the transmission fluid could be a little bit scary. We don't have a fill plug on this, and so it has to be done on the transmission. So put the link for his video up in the top corner here, and I would definitely recommend that if you're planning on changing out your transmission fluid, you follow that link. He goes through in great detail on how to do it. I'm going to be copying exactly what he did there and following him step by step. So join me as we hop underneath and start to swap out the transmission fluid. Before we get started, it's important to note that the correct transmission fluid to use, as far as I've been able to research, is this ADFWS. Now I have gone ahead and bought 15 quarts of it. We should only be swapping out 12, but let's say we get to 13 quarts and we swap that out, and then we still need to do a top up. I prefer to have a little bit of extra fluid. So I've got 15 quarts of this Toyota ADFWS that I'll be using during the course of the morning today. Now, if you've watched Timmy the Toolman's video, you'll see the other important thing that you need is a graduated jug to catch the transmission fluid in. Now, unfortunately, I don't have such a nice container, but what I have done is I've taken this old bottle and I've measured out 4 quarts and drawn the lines so that I can see how much oil is coming out of the transmission as I drain it. The next thing we're going to need is this transmission fluid pump. Now this is a new piece of equipment which I didn't have, so I've just bought this in, and if I look at the markings here for the graduation for the volume, it's all marked out in liters and not in quarts. Now usually I'm comfortable working in liters, but in this situation we need to fill by quarts. So what I'm going to actually do is take my 1 quart of transmission fluid over here, fill it, and then mark where that is and continue to fill it until I've got this filled, so that I know how many quarts of transmission fluid we're going to be using. So filling this up has been rather interesting. You'll see here we started out with 1 quart, which is very close to a liter, 2 liters just below for 3 quarts, 4 quarts and 5 quarts. So this looks round about right what I was expecting. However, I thought it a bit odd that with the size of this container changing over here, that we'd be up to 6 liters, and so 6 quarts should be down here. And what you can see is the 6th quart has filled us right up to the brim. So in actual fact, this is only a 5 quart container, not a 6 liter container as the label would have it be. And so next time I'm only going to fill it up to 5 quarts over here. So it was a good exercise to mark this out, because you can see that this is highly inaccurate. Right, so fortunately it did not mess when we put the lid on. We're now good to go. We're going to start getting under the Jeep and removing the skid plates so we can access the transmission. Right, so you'll have seen that as part of the transmission fluid drain procedure, we need to get inside of there and undo some of the hoses that are the return lines for the transmission. In order to do that, we're going to have to take off the skid plate over here, and the other part that we're going to have to get to is the transmission, which is under that skid plate over there. So that will have to come off as well. Now, while we've got all of this off, we're also planning to do the differential. So if you look in there, there's the drain plug for the differential over there, so much easier to work without the skid plates in place. I'm going to go ahead and quickly pop off all of these skid plates. Right, so unfortunately this fitting over here has stripped out. You can see that the hex has stripped out completely. So I'm going to have to get this out. There's one of 3 ways to do it. Ideally I just weld a nut on the inside here. Unfortunately I don't have a MIG gun, so that option is not available.
The other alternative is to just drill out the center hole over here until we can get the head of the fastener to pop off. And if that doesn't work, then I'll just take an angle grinder and cut the head off completely. So I'm going to go ahead and make a plan to get this fastener out so that I can get this belly plate loose.
So before we get started, just a couple of things to point out. This is the level plug over there. If you're watching Tim the Toolman's video, you'll know this is where we check the level. And then this over here is the drain plug. So we're going to go ahead in a couple of moments and crack that to drain the pan out. And then very importantly is the fill plug. Now it's rather hard to find. I took a while to find it and it was a bit unclear from Tim's video. But if you do have a look over there, there it is up there hidden away. This is on the driver's side. Virtually directly above the cross member, so straight up from the cross member on the driver's side, there is our full plug. So before I do anything, I'm going to make sure I can open the full plug, and I'll do that first before I pull out the drain plug down here to drain the oil out at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get that full plug loose, and then see if I can get the drain plug out after that. Right, so before I do any work, I just want to grab the brake cleaner and just clean any loose dirt off these plugs so that there's no dirt contaminating the oil in any way. It's that one drain plug, although it's not so important. The difficult one obviously is this full plug that's way up there, but I can't get to it, so I'm going to just get in there and clean the full plug out. Alright, so we've been able to make this plug loose, and we should be able to remove it now. Just a little bit tricky to get in here. Right, so there is the full plug. We've got that out. What we'll do now is we'll install the full tube to be able to refill that. Alright, so next thing that we're going to do is install this filler fitting that will connect up to our pressure fill system. It's going to slip in there, and we'll tighten up this nut over here. Alright, so the fitting is now installed, and we'll just be able to connect the quick coupler onto the end as we start to fill. So as I undo this sump plug to drain out the oil, I do want to just mention that I'm not going to capture the oil and measure it. I'm just going to accept that there's about 2 quarts that are going to come out, and I will midstream capture some of the oil just to see what color it is, just for my own information. So that plug is about to pop out now. Let me just get a container. And there we go. And yep, you can see this oil is very, very dark and in very poor condition. So just as well I decided to swap out this oil. Alright, so with the fluid out, we're going to go ahead now and replace the drain plug over here. And we're just going to get it nice and tight without putting too much torque on it. There we go. That's just fine. And finally, we'll just grab our brake cleaner and just clean up any of this loose oil that's left behind. Great. Alright, next thing to do is now to use our filler and reinstall about 2 quarts of fluid. Right, so we now have the fluid fill pump connected up via this quarter turn fastener over here, and that is going to push oil back into the transmission. So as I open this, we should start seeing the oil coming up, and we'll see on the container side over here the oil will start to drop as we pump. so the camera might not be able to, actually the camera shows it better than what you can see it. We're just below the quart right now, so we've got a little bit more to go to get the 2 quarts back in. Right, so we're going to close this pedal now, and we are almost spot on at 2 quarts back in. So we've now refilled the sump with fresh transmission oil. So we're going to go on to the next step now, and you can see there we're sitting almost exactly at 2 quarts into that sump. Right, so I have followed the lines from the transmission. This is the hot red supply to the radiator, so I've marked that as such. It comes out of the radiator and goes to the auxiliary cooler, and this here would be the cold return to the transmission. So what I'm going to do is undo this clamp and then install my little bit of 3/8 hose, and I'm actually just going to use this pipe here and run this hose that way around so that I can extract the fluid from here. So let me get that done next. Right, so we've got our container here that's marked off in quarts. I'm going to get someone to start the car, and then we'll watch the oil fill up, and I'll stop it just before it hits that 1 quart over there, and then we'll take a quart out of the system. All right, start. Perfect. All right, so we've now drained out a quart. We're going to go ahead now and refill with another quart. Right, so we're going to drop down now from our 4 quart mark over here all the way down to our 3 quart mark. Right, so camera might not be able to see it pretty well, but the level is right there on our 3 quart mark. So we've added another quart to the transmission. We're going to go back to the front now and then drain out another quart. Right, so we've got the 2nd quart drained out now. We're going to go ahead and fill with another quart. Right, so we're going to fill now from 3 quart down to 2 quart. Here we go. So camera might not be showing it really well, but we're right there on that 2 quart mark. So we're going to go ahead now and drain the next quart out. Right, when you're ready, go for it. Whoa! Good job. Right, so there we go. Another quart out. And we're going to go and refill again. Alright, so we've now drained out 13 quarts. We were supposed to only do 12, but I decided to do 1 extra just for posterity. And you will see the difference in color between the oil that came out originally over here and the one that's coming out now. This is very black, and this has at least got some red color to it. So now that we've drained out the oil, the next thing that we're going to do is reconnect our hose over here so that we can return back, and then we will go to the process of checking final oil level. Right, to finally check the level, what we need to do is to bring the oil temperature up to between 97 and 115 Fahrenheit, and then we'll go underneath the Jeep and take out the level plug and check that the oil is running out. Now there are many ways to do this, and if you watch the other video which we put in the link, you'll see that you can use the special tool, or you can use a scan gauge. So I've actually got a scan gauge over here, and we'll be switching this to temperature so that you can watch the temperature. At the same time, I'm going to be shifting the transmission through all of its gears as I do the warm-up, so that we can bring the temperature up and shift it through the gears as per the process that's required. So let's get going with that. Right, so you'll see that right now we're at between 82 and 85 F with the temperature rising. So while that goes up, I'm going to get down here and I'm just going to slowly shift through all my gears. Right, and if we watch the temperature, you'll see that the oil temperature is going up, and I'm not sure why there are two oil temperatures, so we'll just watch both and see what happens. Right, I'm going to just quickly switch off and then hop underneath and make sure that there's no leaks anywhere, because if there are any leaks then we'd have a problem. So a quick check of the underside shows no major leaks anywhere, so I'm happy to go on to bring the temperature up. Alright, so we're watching the temperatures rise, and I think what I figured out is that this temperature 2 is probably the output temperature that's going to the cooler, and this temperature here is probably sump temperature. So I'm going to watch for that one to reach 97 before we go and check the level. Right, so you'll see our transmission temperature is now at 97F, so we're going to go underneath and then pull out that level plug and see what the level does. Right, so with the engine running, we're going to pop out this plug. Now I've undone it already so that it's loose, and let's see if there's any transmission fluid coming out. Only a few drips, so we're going to go and add about a quarter of a quart, and then we'll check it again. Right, so let's check if this time the fluid is at the necessary level, and still not, so we're going to add a little more. Right, so we've added some more, and let's see if it will start to dribble out yet. The fluid is right there. Not yet. Right, so we've topped up the oil. I'm going to open this plug now and see if it's at the correct level yet. And yep, we've overfilled it, so we'll allow some of this oil to drain out. And it should change from a stream to a trickle, and when it does, we're at the correct level. There we go, stream to a trickle. Trickle is hard to define, so slightly different opinions there, but I would call that a trickle. So I'm going to shut this off. Good. So the transmission is now filled up to the correct level, and we have successfully changed our transmission fluid. Okay, so what we now need to do is get in here and remove this full tube, which is now nice and tight, and the exhaust pipe's pretty hot, so I'm going to leave it to cool down for a while, and I'll come back and do that a bit later. Right, so I don't like leaving everything dirty. I'm just going to go ahead with my brake cleaner and clean up all of this oil that has messed over here. Now I'm not spraying directly onto the bushes because I don't think that's good for the bushes, but everywhere else can get some brake clean. So the next job I'm going to do is to drain out the oil and replace the oil in the front differential. Now over here is our drain plug, and up there is our fill plug. Now while I was reading up about doing this job, I found an interesting comment which says undo the fill plug first and then the drain plug, which almost seems counterintuitive until you really think about it. If you have any issues undoing the fill plug over there, you'd rather keep the oil in the differential until you know you can get this plug out before you take the oil out. If for any reason you can't get this plug out, you strip it, or you have any issue, your vehicle will still remain drivable until such time as you can drop the diff to get that plug out. If you drain the oil out and then cannot get this plug out, you now have an undrivable vehicle, and wherever it is, you're going to have to drop this whole differential out. So I'm going to follow that advice. I'm going to undo my fill plug. When I know I can undo the fill plug, then I'll remove the drain plug and drain all the oil out. Right, now unfortunately when I really undid these the first time around, my video camera wasn't on. So I'll just show you what I did. I have a 10mm Allen cap there, and I have learnt that one way of preventing these Allens from spinning, or to get them out easily, is actually to tighten it. So what I would do is I just give it a small tighten like that, and as soon as it moves, you don't want to over tighten, so as soon as it moves you're going to stop, and then you will pull it back in the opposite direction. So we've undone the fill cap. So now that I know I'll be able to fill, I'm going to come ahead down here and do the exact same. I'm going to switch it over, I'm going to give it a tighten, and then I'm going to loosen it. So there we go, it's now loose. So we're ready to take out the drain. I'm going to get my bucket into place, and I want to capture the amount of fluid that comes out, so I know how much was in there when I started. Okay, so I've got my bucket over here, and then I'm going to go ahead, pull out this drain plug. Now one way of doing this to try and reduce the amount of mess is actually to push the drain plug in until you feel the last tooth click, which is around about there, which means that this plug should just pull straight out and let the oil out. So there we go. Okay, we're going to let that drain out, and now that it's loose, we can go ahead and undo the full plug up at the top, which will help to get the oil out a bit faster. There we go. You can see the difference as soon as the fill plug came out. Fill plug that I've got here has got a magnetic tip on it, which is great news. That'll allow me to check if anything is going on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe off the fuzz like this, and then we're going to go and check. And what we're looking for is any pieces of chunks. If you look at this silver metallic stuff, that's fine, that's just wear particles, that's normal operation in a diff. What we're looking for is anything that's making chunks, and chunks would indicate that something is going wrong inside of the differential. So I'm just feeling through this to feel if I can find any chunks, and as you can see, anything that I pick up there just goes into this fine silver powder. Let's check over here. Alright, so absolutely no chunks of metal, so that's a really good sign. Tells me that this diff is probably in a good condition and I have nothing to worry about. So I'm going to go ahead now, grab some brake cleaner and really clean out this sump plug, so that we can go and get this reinstalled as soon as it's finished draining. Alright, so you might see that these two seals that were on the fill and the drain plug are quite old. They've got some deformation on the side there. Now usually you can reuse these seals, they'll work a time or two before they would start to leak again. I've decided, however, to go ahead and replace them. So over here I've got some new seals, and I'm just going to take two new aluminum seals and pop them on over there. So that's good, we're all ready to go and reinstall our drain plug, and then once we've filled up, we'll put the full plug back in. So while we were cleaning the plugs, we have drained out just under 1.5 liters, about 1.5 quarts worth of diff oil, and you'll see that there's still a very small trickle running out over here. And because this oil is so thick, it is takes a long time to get it all out. I'm not going to wait forever. I think we've got most of it out, so I'm going to go ahead now and reinstall the sump plug and then start with the refill. Now refilling this is going to be rather challenging, but we'll get to that in a moment. So you'll see, just making it nice and tight. You don't want to make this too tight, but that's done now. And I will, once we've got it filled up, come and clean all of this off here with some proper degreaser or spray clean. For now, just a quick wipe there helps clean a little. Right, so filling this is going to be a bit of a challenge. I've got to get the fluid in here, which is way up there. So I won't be able to fit the bottle in here to try and squeeze it in. So the only way I would be able to do that is either to use the fluid pump, which I used for the transmission. I don't particularly feel like cross-contaminating that with differential oil. So I'm going to eliminate that for now. And what I've decided to do is I'm just going to use a short section of hose. And I'm going to put it in here, run the hose through there, and then bring my bottle and put my bottle over here where I've got some space. So I'll be able to squeeze it over here somewhere and allow the oil to run in and fill the differential. Now what we're trying to do is fill the differential until the oil runs out here. So let's get ahead and see if we can get that done. If you've worked with high-point gear oil before, you'll know it smells really, really bad. So in order to try and reduce the smell on my hands, I'll put some gloves on. What we're going to do now is get this hose into the full port over there. Right, once it's in there, yeah, we're going to flip this bottle over and we'll start squeezing this oil in. Now we know we took out about 1.5 quarts, so I suspect we're going to have to put back in 1.5 quarts. Right, so we've got the first quart in. I'm quickly going to swap over and grab the next quart. Now what we need to keep watching for as we start doing this next quart is for the oil to start running out of the differential. Because the tube's in there, it'll overfill fairly easily and then we'll have too much oil in there. So we'll just keep watching, and the moment we see the oil there, we'll stop on this side. Right, I just want to check that we haven't overfilled it just yet. I'm not pulling this pipe out. And we still don't have oil coming out, so we just need to put a bit more in. Alright. Right, so we started to see a couple of drips coming on there. I'm going to stop, pull my hose out, and there we go. Too much oil already. So we now know that this is full. You can go ahead and put the full plug back in. So the last thing we need to do before we're done with this diff is just to make sure that this plug is nice and tight. So I'm just going to use my 10mm again and just make sure that that's nice and tight. No need to over tighten it. We do have those new gaskets on there. So all good, front diff is done. we'll move over to the rear diff next. Right, so the rear differential is absolutely no different to the front. We have our full plug over there, which we'll undo first, and down here we have our drain plug, which we'll undo once we've got the full plug loose, and then we'll drain out the oil from this differential and replace it exactly like we did at the front. Right, so once again, exactly like we did at the front, I want to inspect this magnetic plug. And again, I'm looking for anything that's chunky on here. This fine stuff is no issue. And here we did find one chunk. So there is a sliver. That's not a good sign. You never want to see slivers like this in a differential. You might be able to see it better there. So there you can see that little sliver. That's what you don't want to find. So this is some piece of metal inside of that differential that's come loose. Fortunately, there's not many more of them. There's another little sliver. But this is giving me an indication that there is something going on inside of this rear differential that I need to be aware of. Overhauling the rear differentials on a Toyota is unlike a Jeep. Because their third member is removable, it's actually not such a big job. I could pull that rear differential out and then set it on a bench. So worst case, if something does happen to that rear differential, I'll pull it out. I would change ratios and probably put a locker in before I put it back in. So this is just a wake-up call to be aware. I think what I'm going to do is I am going to do a half interval oil change and see if I find any more. In other words, I was planning on leaving these differentials for the next 50,000 miles. I think at 25,000 miles, I'm going to pull this differential again and see if I find more chunks. If I don't find any more chunks, we're good to go. If I do, then we'll make a decision at that point. So definitely something to be aware of going forward. Right, so the first thing to note is we've taken about 3.5 liters or 3.5 quarts out of this differential, so we'll need to refill around about 3.5 quarts. And then the other nice thing to see is I think we'll be able to fill a bottle in here, so we'll be able to direct fill and not have to use a tube, which would make life easier. So I'm going to get cracking now and then put the drain plug back in and then do the fill through that hole. Rear diff is filled, and last thing that we got to do now is our transfer case. Right, the transfer case fluid is very similar to the diff. We have the full plug over here, which we're going to undo first, and we have the drain plug over here, which we'll undo once we know we can get that done. What's interesting on this Lexus or the Land Cruiser series is that it actually uses the same oil, the GLI 5, as the differentials. So we're just going to put differential fluid into there. So exactly as we've done with the differentials, we're going to take this magnetic plug and we're going to scrape off the magnet side. And once again, we're looking for anything that's chunky or flaky. So there's one sliver there. No, I can't find it. So there certainly was a little sliver there. And there's a chunk. And there's another chunk. So once again, two chunks, which is never a good thing. You don't like finding chunks in there. So I'm going to actually do exactly the same as what I did with the rear differential. There's that sliver. And if you can see it on the camera, it's a very fine piece of steel over there. So two chunks and a sliver. That's of concern. I'm not going to down the vehicle because of that, but definitely something to pay attention to. And so same as with the rear differential, I'm going to do a half interval check and see if I find any more chunks in this transfer case. Other than that, I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the plug and then replace the two gaskets so that I can reinstall. Right, so one other thing I want to do while I'm down here is to grease the drive shaft. You'll see there's a zerk there, and inside there's another zerk there. So I'm going to go ahead and clean these two before I put my grease gun on there to make sure they're clean. At the other side of the drive shaft will be the same thing. You can see there's the zerk way inside there. So this one's going to be a little bit tough to get to, but I might have to just jack the wheels up so that I can rotate this drive shaft so that I can get access to that zerk. But we definitely do need to grease these fittings, so I'm going to go ahead and get that done next. Right, you have to be careful when you greasing these joints. You don't want to put too much grease in because there are some seals in there that could get damaged. So we're just going to give it a squirt or two. I think that'll be enough. And then we're going to try and see if we can reach this inside one. Yep, it'll go on there. Right. Now, you might be able to see some of the grease starting to escape there, or at least you'll be able to see the seals swell as we put it in. This one particularly we need to be careful of that we don't pop these seals. Alright, and I think that's enough. Not going to add any more than that. So we've greased these two. Just wipe off the excess grease so it doesn't fling out. We're now going to move to the other side of the shaft and see if we can get in there to get grease on the zerk on the other side. Right, finding a good camera angle to do this is turning out to be rather difficult. Let's try it from this side. Right, that's on. So same thing we did on the other side, we're just going to give it a couple of squirts. Right, now what you might not be able to see is I don't think the grease is going into this joint. So let me see if I can get the camera where you can see it. So you might be able to see what happened there is that the fitting was not completely on the zerk, and so all the grease which I put in has now squeezed past the zerk and all over the place. So I'm going to go and get that out so it doesn't spin grease onto our cat, which would be not so nice. Right, and then once it's out, I'm going to go and try and seat that grease fitting in there a little bit better. Alright, I can see why it didn't work. If you look over here, this fitting needs to move upwards, and I can't because of the cat in the way. So I'm going to have to rotate the drive shaft. Now in order to do that, I'm going to have to jack the car up so that the front wheels are off the ground, and then I should be able to rotate this drive shaft just enough so that I can get in here properly with the zerk. We're jacked up now, so I'm going to turn a wheel and you should be able to see the drive shaft rotating. Alright, now I'm going to try and get in there again and see if I can get this in enough. Here goes. Much better. Now that it's on there, let me see if I can give it a couple of squirts. Right, now what I've done is put too much grease in. Remember I said just a few squirts? Let's see what's happening. So if you look in there, you'll see the grease is now pushing out from underneath the seals. So just be very gentle when you put grease in this so that you don't over grease like I just did. But at least we know that it has got enough grease in there now. So I'm going to go ahead and just clean up as much of this grease as possible. And the reason I'm cleaning it is we've got our cat right here, and this grease will fling out and sit on the cat. And I don't particularly want that to happen, so I'm going to go ahead and clean that. Right, the next one that we have to do is this rear one. So you'll see that the zerk is up there. We're going to struggle to get that, to reach it. And the other zerk is inside there pointing in this direction. So I'm going to have to rotate the shaft so that I can access these two zerks. So let me go and stick the Lexus into neutral, and then I'll jack up the rear end so that the rear wheels are off the ground, and with the transfer case in neutral, rear wheels off the ground, I'll be able to rotate this. Now just a note, if you are going to jack up the rear to rotate the rear wheels, make sure that you chock the front wheels because there will be nothing holding the vehicle in place. So I'm going to chock the wheels first and then switch it into neutral and rotate the shaft. And you can see that this here is a little bit dry because this should be lubricated, so definitely in need of some grease on the shaft. Alright, with one rear wheel off the ground, I should be able to rotate this drive shaft so I can access those two zerks. There we go. I'll bring them down like that. And we're going to follow the same procedure. I'll clean them and then grease. Right, so let's get in here and clean this out. And then we've got to get this zerk that's all the way inside of here. This is so hard to get in here. So exactly the same as we did last time. We're going to clip this on here, and then we're going to just put a little bit of grease in. We're looking at this side here now for this grease to come out. I don't want to put too much in. I think that'll be enough. I'm going to just stop there. And we'll get this one on the inside here. And you might be able to see these seals swell as I put the grease in, so just keep watching. Right, I don't want to put any more than that in. So let's just go ahead now and clean up all of this loose grease, because once again, if this grease spins out, it's going to end up right here on the exhaust pipes. So we just want to make sure that we clean up after ourselves. Alright, this shaft position is actually perfect to get in here to the zerk over there. So I'm just going to go ahead, clean, and then grease this joint. Alright, same as last time, just a couple of squirts. Keep watching, you might see those seals swell. Now I can actually hear the grease coming out somewhere, don't know where. But I think that's enough. Alright. Great. So we've now greased our drive shafts as well. Right, so having greased the shafts, we now have another little maintenance item we can take off the checklist. So we've put a couple of miles on the Lexus now since we've done that transmission oil change. Gear shifts are still firm and there's no slippage that I can detect, and certainly not any check engine lights. So all said, I think that was a really good exercise to change that oil out. As we saw, it was very, very dirty. I'm going to swap out the transmission pan filter next time I do a major service, and that'll be another 2 quarts of oil that I'll swap out at that point. But until then, I think we're really good. We saw the diffs, and we will need to just monitor the diffs as well, the diff oil, to see if there's any more chunks in there. So really glad that I was able to do that service, and I think we're set up for the next couple of miles now. So at the end of the day, a really good service.
You while you're down, they wanna rise up while you drown. They wanna fill your head with doubt. They're silently scared that you'll figure it out. I'll make it look like I'm losing, won't bother hiding my bruises. And when they finally think you're wounded, then it's your chance to be ruthless.